it's Derrick Henry's return to the Tennessee Titans practice field because he's on pace to rejoin the team as soon as the playoffs begin. We know that because they've opened the window for him to practice today. Paul, what'd you observe? You were there.
Yeah, look, he looked really good. Now we saw, team stretch period running. If you're watching with us, you see him here on the right side of the screen, run it down and back. They did some conditioning early in practice here.
You said he looked good.
I think he looked, if you didn't know he was coming off of something in this stretch / run period, and then in a period with the running backs in which he did everything all of the running backs did, start to finish, you wouldn't say there's a guy coming off something serious by any means. Now, there wasn't a lot of speed. There's not a lot of sharp cutting, and there's no contact, obviously. So, you got to keep all that stuff in mind. But in this window, you wouldn't look at him and have any question marks about it. Here we're watching him, run with the ball connected to the string.
Which foot did he injure?
Right.
Okay.
Now he's going to take.
I was trying to think of what I'm watching because he looks so good. It's hard to know if he's favoring one or the other.
Taking a handoff or two from Tannehill here, in the triangle that they running behind Kari Blasingame. It's funny, the red jersey of Tannehill in these videos looks almost like the maroon of the Washington football team. Coming up here, it will go quickly to, this is the most important one, I think. Lateral, 3 steps side to side through the bags, then turns and runs to his left. I mean, there's nothing you can see there. Here's some slow footwork, jabbing pads, turning left, punching at a coach or two. And then he'll go out here and he'll catch a little pass, take a couple of turn around, catch a pass. Very confident footwork.
Everything that you would normally see, Paul, based on early training camp work prior to practice beginning, right? I mean, nothing out of the norm for him.
That's a completely normal Wednesday running back period. I don't think there's anything designed there to key him. I don't know. I don't think there was any hesitancy from him at the beginning of this period, but they were all kind of standing around waiting on Tony Dews just for a second at the beginning. And I'm not sure they knew exactly what the first drill was. And Dews called for Derrick to make sure that he was at the head of the line. So he assumed his natural position at the front of the line. No Foreman, no Hilliard, no McNichols in that spot. Derrick Henry in the position you'd want your starting running back to be in at the head of the line. Now, what that means for what happens after that in practice, which is closed, and where he is and what he did, I don't know. I'd be very surprised if he takes a full practice today. And how he feels tomorrow morning off whatever work he does today. I mean, that's the most extensive drill work he's done since October 28th. So how he feels tomorrow will be a factor in things for sure.
I also want to point this out because Paul brought up a good point about the field turf and the return to practice. Here in Nashville, tomorrow they're expecting ice and snow around 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
They would take that practice maybe indoors because they're playing on the turf in Houston. And with that in mind, I would think that could also adjust his practice regimen this week. I don't know that. But if that's going to play a factor on whether or not you're going to play him in a game, would that play a factor in whether or not you want to work him in practice? Don't know, but these are all things to be considered. And I know Coach Vrabel was asked about that today with the field turf idea versus natural grass, and he played it off like, we take a lot of things into consideration, I think is what he said. But what vibe did you get from Vrabel, Paul, on return to play? Not practice, but play.
Annoyance.
That was the vibe?
He took 3 or 4 Henry questions and said, anybody have anything on the Texans?
Any vibe whatsoever that he could play this week? Do you think there's a scenario where they activate him on Saturday as they fly to Houston? That's when the activations happen.
I don't think there was a vibe or a hint one way or the other about that. It was exactly the same tone as he has any Wednesday when somebody's come off the list into the practice window. which I think is a sincere vibe. Like, we have to look at him. We don't know. We haven't seen him in a long time, and we have to see what he looks like.
Let me throw this out there. And Paul, you and Hutton both, tell me what you think on this. How much consideration will go to what Derrick Henry wants to do in this game?
Large part.
And
See, I
knowing
less
Derrick
than
Henry, what do you think Derrick Henry will want to do?
Well, I don't know how, Paul, I think maybe, I don't know if he needs this game. But I also
ask because I think it's a difficult answer.
Well,
I don't know for sure in this setting. He's a guy who wants to play games.
See, I don't know if they get
that,
an honest answer out of him is the problem. I think he defaults to I want to play.
Well,
and I don't know if they could sit down with him and have the conversation that you're talking about, where it's very much about, hey, what will this mean to you going forward? All of that. I think he's robotic in, play me.
I think it's important to note, and we haven't seen him. The NFL media, the coaching staff, Henry, we haven't seen him return from injury like this. So that's why it's so difficult to say what he would want to do. We do know what they do in the preseason leading up to, the live action. They don't play him. And they hardly practice the guy. He's available, but it's not like when they have a full padded practice and there's goal line drills. He's not taking a lot of those reps. He does a lot of individual work and then that's what happened this year,
Goes
Paul.
in the sand pit, goes inside, goes on the bike, goes on an elliptical.
Meanwhile, you've got, some of the quarterbacks, the star quarterbacks of the league, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, others, who chose to play in that third preseason game this year just to knock the rust off. So I don't know how he's going to feel coming back from injury, ready to play after a 3-day practice week. That is where I do think you have to lean on the player who knows his body, who knows the rehab regimen, who knows just how he feels. The doctors certainly play a major role in all of this. And then you have to go into, the risk factors. And that's where Paul's coming in, and I agree with him. That's where, despite how anyone would feel, you have to measure the risk versus the reward and make sure you've got your guy for the run of the postseason, which is what you've been building towards. It was weather the storm, and they've done more than that. They're currently the number 1 seed. Weather the storm and get your horse back, get your thoroughbred back. And they've got him in the backfield now. I would ensure that you've got that ready to go. But again, he hasn't been through this before, so we really don't know how he feels about getting a couple reps.
And just let's go with that. You're saying the risk. Let's go on the reward side.
Sure.
Like, what's the big reward from him getting work this week?
It would be
win the game.
It would be the mindset of, like Chad's saying, the player thinks or knows he wants to get in there and, bang some hats and get ready, get conditioned for the postseason for live action.
But I'm saying when you get to a divisional round opening game for yourself, how much will you really have gained from him playing versus the risk?
I agree.
To me, the risk column is way more red than the reward column is green.
And
because what if, God forbid, he play in this game, he gets stepped on in the wrong way or something, and he have a setback? The air comes out of the tire.
And I would also say he doesn't come across to me as a guy that's going to be very rusty. Like he's a veteran player. This is not some guy that is 1 or 2 years into the league and you have to feel him out. I think you know what you have in Derrick Henry.
So going back to the bang hats mantra, and Derrick Henry certainly fits that.
Yes.
He's going to want to play if he can play. But I think the question from Derrick Henry, who's a smart guy and a smart competitor, would be, I don't want to do anything that would risk me not suiting up for a home playoff game, right? That's first and foremost on your mind. I want to be there when the crowd is at its loudest, when the stakes are the highest, in the big moment, when more eyeballs are watching. Players want to play in those games. So he obviously wants to play in that game. So I think the response would be if he asked the doctors or the coaches, whoever, and said, look, I obviously want to play in games when I can play. Is there any added risk in me playing this game other than the natural risk of participating in a football game, right? Anytime you go and suit up, there's a risk you're going to get hurt. But if the answer is, well, you're not really going to know how you can turn on that foot and do things in a game until you play in a game. If that's the answer and there's a risk of, I'm going to get out there and find out in the course of the game, I think Derrick Henry then, that would be the only way that he would come back and say, okay, I'd rather figure that out in the home playoff game then.